worked.
Right. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Ebbsfleet Development Corporation Planning Committee. Can I first of all apologise that we're starting late? It's entirely my fault. Well, I blame it on the M25, but it's my fault. So we'll start with introductions as we normally do. My name's Neil Cameron. I'm an EDC board member and I chair this committee. And I'll turn to the other committee members, starting with Valerie.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Valerie Owen. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Committee and a board member at the EDC.
Good afternoon, I'm Penny Marsh. I'm an independent member of the Planning Committee.
Lee Croxton, Gratian Borough Council Chair Planning.
Councillor David Moat, Dartford Borough Council Cabinet Member for Housing.
Thank you very much. And Mark, would you like to introduce any of the officers?
I can do, yeah, thanks. So I'm Mark Bull, I'm Director of Planning and Place. Today you'll mainly hear from Jed Goodwin-Roberts, who's the case officer, Caroline Barker, who knows everything Eastern Quarry related, and Simon Harrison, who's the head of design.
That's a bit of a challenge for us, isn't it?
That's quite an introduction.
He knows that's what she is.
But it's true.
Yes.
So we will turn to the agenda. First of all, apologies for absence. So we've received any
Apologies from Fred Marunas today.
Thank you. Declarations of interest in addition to any standing declarations. I have one. I have worked with Alec Philpott of Mayor Brown on a case a couple of years ago, and that was in my capacity as a barrister. Right, urgent items.
Well, none today, Joe.
We now go to the minutes of the meeting that we held on the 15th of July. And we have a draft. We also have a supplementary report which has got a suggested amendment. Does anybody else have any comments on the minutes? No? But can we approve the minutes with the amendment and supplementary information?
Great.
Great.
Thank you. So we're now on to the main item on the agenda, which is Alkden Village Parcel 3. And just to remind everybody of the procedure that we're going to adopt, it's all set out in our terms of reference, and I think many of you are familiar with our procedures. We're going to have an officer presentation from Jed, which will be up to 10 minutes. We look forward to that. We then have no objectors registered to speak, unless anything's changed. No. We got supporters, and you have 5 minutes in total. How you use your 5 minutes is entirely up to you. And then after that, members of the committee might have questions or clarification. And if they do, I'm sure that the applicant team will do their best to answer them. And once that process is finished, we'll have the committee discussion or debate, and then we'll make a decision. So is everybody happy with the procedure? It's in accordance with our terms of reference. So if you're not happy, that's the way that it goes. Right. Well, let's start off with Jed Goodwin-Roberts.
Oh, sorry. Good afternoon, members. The application forward today is for Alkden Parcel 3. Just to remind members, there was a supplementary that was circulated a little earlier this afternoon, which we discussed in detail at the end of the presentation. So the site is Alkden Parcel 3. And this is an application brought to us by Bellway for a reserve matter scheme for 56 dwellings, of which there are 4 one-bed apartments, 12 2-bed, 4 one-bed coach houses, 4 2-bedroom coach houses, and there are 14 3-bedroom houses and 18 4-bedroom, of which 57% of the housing being provided are family-sized dwellings. And this application is made pursuant to condition 2 of the Eastern Quarry Outline Permission. It should be noted that the scheme is 100% private tenure and includes 54% compliance for M42 units. The scheme's also been developed with a fabric-first approach for an efficient development, and the scheme would provide 61 parking spaces, which would be the distributions discussed in later slides. So here is a site location and its context within the master plan. So obviously the Whitecliff master plan comprises of 3 urban villages. This urban village is Alkerdon, which is the central village with a large district centre. And what we can see here is the site is adjacent to the education campus. And our site is within a 5-minute walking distance of, or less than a 5-minute walking distance within the Alkerdon kind of town centre or commercial centre. And within 10 minutes, you've got walks in towards kind of, you know, wider afield, but this is the general location of that. And then this slide here is effectively just the framework of the outline planning permission. So as you can see on this slide here, these are the kind of the adopted plans and planning documents which form part of the kind of the site-wide, you know, planning permissions. And here we have is the reserved matters, which is this application, or one of the reserved matters of Eastern Quarry. So that, yep, this is the kind of application we're looking at today. And then finally, onto access and layout. So the site itself is north of Fast Track, which is here. So this is the dedicated bus route that links between Bluewater, Dartford, and Gravesend town centres, and then this is kind of the middle section of that. So as you can see, so that falls to the south of the site. To the north, we have Portbridge Gardens, which is a road that links into the education campus, and it links up to, I think it's Castle Hill Drive, not Castle Hill Drive, Whitecliff Drive at the top. To the north here, we've got the education campus, and over here is one of the vehicular accesses into the site. To the south off of Fast Track, we've got a pedestrian kind of path into it, which is a landscaped path which allows pedestrians and cycle access into the site and permeability, and then you can then get out of the site to the north through Portbridge Gardens. And yet, also to note, which isn't in this, the Castle Hill Linear Park is here to the east of the site, and Castle Hill is then further beyond there. What also should be noted in this is that all the cycle storage would be accessed for the houses, access from the rear kind of areas, access in the houses, and in the blocks of flats, again, they're accessed within the kind of these circulation spaces integrated within the buildings. We also have a series of covered parking spaces up here in the northwest. These are directly accessed off of Portbridge Gardens, and these are will be discussed later, enclosed in timber frame pergolas. This is a bit more of a kind of a detailed view of the site. So this is the western end of the site. And this is effectively just showing where the parking is. So we've got visitor space intercepted with allocated kind of resident space along here. And yeah, so that would be accessed via Portbridge Gardens. And then the next slide is the internal laneway. So we've got vehicular access from here, and we've got a turning head at this part of the site between the flats and the houses, to now enable larger vehicles to turn around here. And the parking for the dwelling, the parking is underneath the coach houses. So we've got then design. So we've got an indicative street scene of the site. And then kind of, this is kind of the street scene of Fast Track. So as you can see, we've got the education campus here. And then the street scene starts and ends with the flatted blocks. This is block number 1, which is to the eastern end of the site. And this is a key gateway building into Alkerdon. So this is distinctively designed with the asymmetric roof, and it has active facades fronting onto Fast Track. Unfortunately, I don't have the picture on this slide, but we've also got an active frontage overlooking the linear park to the east. And this is The other block of flats on the other side is a key gateway corner for the site. And then this just shows kind of the rhythm of the development along the street scene. So you'd have the rows of 3-storey terrace houses. So the heights of the buildings and how the buildings act as markers relate to the area master plans for Alkerdon and this site being in the market centre. A bit more of a detailed version of the flat. So yeah, as discussed before, this is a key corner building. A key fast track corner building with its distinctive roof. We've got a lot of detailing, so we've got darker brick, and we've got brick banding for the plinth which runs throughout the site, and contrasting coin detailing around the windows within the red brick colour. We've also got a projecting porch entrance on the ground floor, and we've got a condition for detailed balcony design guidance, but it would be effectively a laser printed cut out balconies for that. Again, the other block on the site, which is at the western end, similar principles, but this is more of a kind of a flat roof building as opposed to one with the asymmetric roof. And this relates well to kind of the adjoining buildings on the education campus with that. To the rear of the site, we've got the coach houses. So these are accessed via Portsbridge Gardens. There's effectively kind of 2 types of coach houses. We've got the 1 bedrooms here, which are defined with the wider gables, and we've got the 2 bedrooms down here, which are they're narrower gables on those, but similar design principles with them. And we've got alternating colours with warm red hues and warm and buff coloured hues along here. And then we've got the plinth still running through these buildings. The fast track houses, again, similar kind of, this is the street scene again, showing it in context. What we have got is very similar designs. The main difference between, there's 2 that have recessed porches and the other 3 blocks have projecting porches on the front, but similar kind of principles in terms of the height, massing, and we've got a rhythm of pattern with the colour. Also other kind of things to take note of is within the gables at the tops, we've got decorative brick projecting detailing, and we've also got soldier course detailings around the roof profiles of the same brick for the main house. We've got the plinth that runs through, which is a concrete grey band, and we've got kind of the balconies, and we've got a wide range of fenestration on the front. And this is just an elevation of the houses. There's other elevations should we need to discuss through those. For residential amenity, so all dwellings do comply with the nationally described space standards regarding their intended occupancy levels. Dwellings provided a dual aspect with front and rear views. Some also have corner views as well. All dwellings are provided with outdoor amenity space, through balconies on flats and coach houses, which accords with the design for Ebbsfleet, design for balconies, and the houses all have private gardens which accord with garden requirements outlined in the new Dartford local plan. Across the site, we have 54% compliance with M42, which exceeds the outline planning permission of requirement, which stated it should be at least 25%. The site has also been laid out to avoid inter-overlooking between the houses and the flats along fast track to the houses to the north of the site. How this has been achieved is through a strategically landscaped area towards the back of the gardens with 4 metre high trees with reasonable girth and crown to avoid kind of that level of overlooking. And we've also reorientated some windows within the flat blocks to make sure that they don't have direct views over towards the coach houses. All of the dwellings receive adequate levels of daylight and sunlight. There was no objections raised with the daylight reviews that were submitted with the application. And similarly, there's no objections raised the acoustic attenuations towards the properties. With regards to landscaping, so the site has been landscaped with 52 trees. And these have been intercepted within the car parking spaces towards the western end of the site, some within this centralised kind of access corridor, and some within kind of these areas, and then within the kind of the internal laneway. So it's a very soft landscape. With that, also within the laneway, we have raised planters, which provide planting, and informal seating with that. And as mentioned, we've also got trees around the turning head. And then this is just another kind of view of the landscaping. So here we've got the kind of raised planters that also act as informal seating for the properties. Sustainability. So the scheme adopts a fabric first approach to energy conservation within the buildings. One of the things that the scheme does use is a mechanical ventilation heat recovery system. So recycling and reducing the amount of kind of gaps within the building that heat can be lost. Each dwellings are to be fitted with their own air source heat pumps. These are water efficient dwellings. They meet 105 litres of water per person per day, in which accords with the outline planning permission. Electric vehicle car charging will be provided in accordance with Part S of the current building regulations. And yeah, I mentioned about the air source heat pump. So all dwellings will be provided with their own air source heat pump. Biodiversity. So in terms of that, it's a heavily constrained site owing to its kind of shape and size. There is a planting scheme, and of the planting scheme, it's conditioned to ensure that 25% will be native planting and 25% of the planting will be beneficial to the biodiversity. The submitted details with this within the biodiversity statements also include that there will be bat and bird boxes. 4 will be provided. 4 of each will be provided across the site, which would accord with the site-wide biodiversity action plan, which was secured under condition 15 of the outline planning permission. And the conclusion is that the scheme is considered to provide a high-quality scheme that accords with the area master plan and relevant documents. The scheme itself scores well on the Building for Healthy Life, achieving 10 greens and only 2 ambers. The scheme is 100% compliant with the nationally described space standard, and 54% of all units meet Part M42 of the building regulations, which is in excess of 25% of the outline permission. And there's a lot of energy sustainability measures which have also been implemented in this, which results in a over 64% reduction of carbon dioxide emissions compared to the current building regulations.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Can I now turn to the list people have got?
Sorry, there's also the supplementary
Report which we've received, and I'm sure that people have read it, and it's so there's quite a way over your time already. But
okay, sorry,
it's important we hear.
Sorry, with that there is a one additional update to the supplementary which has been added post it being circulated. So we did put in a pre-start condition within the supplementary, and that was on the second to last paragraph of that, which talks about vehicular and pedestrian access. So we just want to note that Bellway hadn't agreed to this and have requested a first floor level as a trigger. However, on reflection, we considered that the proposed wording can be relaxed given that there are consents around the site. So changing the wording to be above ground floor slab level was considered.
So which condition are you referring to?
Condition.
I don't think it's been numbered in this supplementary, but it's the one that's on the last page, and it's called additional condition. No development should take place until planning permission, and then in brackets. So the proposal, Jed, is that is no development above
ground floor level, first floor level, first floor slab.
Ground floor slab level shall take place until.
And has the applicant agreed to that?
It has.
Thank you very much. Anything else? No,
that's it for me.
I think we'll then move to the supporters, let them have their say, and then we'll engage in discussions. If you'd like to come up to the table, whoever's going to speak.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I am Gregory Evans from Savills. I'm Bellway's planning agent. I'm joined by Emma Shaw and Julian Goodman from Bellway. I'm also joined by some of its technical team, including architects Chris Bath and Alexandra Earle from BPTW Architects. And on teams are the landscape architect, transport consultant, and the engineer for any questions you may have. The planning officer's report and presentation has provided a very comprehensive summary of the scheme and key planning matters, and we really welcome that this application is recommended for approval. This site is constrained through its shape, levels, and proportions. The previous scheme that Bellway brought forward comprised only flats. That scheme was not deliverable due to an increased construction costs and a fall in demand for flats, which came into effect after the permission was granted. Therefore, Bellway and its team has worked closely with EDC planning and design officers on this new scheme for 56 homes in Alkton Village. It includes family homes and some flats, providing a range of properties to respond to market demand. Before submitting the application, the scheme was presented to the design review panel, who provided constructive feedback. This resulted in moving the laneways turning head and the most eastern block of flats being repositioned to hug the eastern boundary to provide a wraparound corner building, forming a focal bookend to the scheme. We really thank officers for their dedication to working with Bellway to ensure a deliverable and optimal scheme is achieved at this constrained site. So the benefits of this scheme include 56 new homes comprising 1 and 2 bed flats, 1 and 2 bed coach houses, and 3 and 4 bedroom houses located at a sustainable location adjacent to the fast track route. All homes designed to meet nationally described space standards, and all homes have private amenity space in the form of a garden for the houses or a private balcony for the flats and coach houses, along with surrounding landscaping, greening the proposal, and offering biodiversity enhancements. The laneway has been developed closely with officers to include tall trees to provide soft landscaping, as well as providing privacy to the gardens, and there are low-level planters that offer seating areas and high-quality materials to create a muse-like atmosphere to the area. All homes fronting the fast track corridor have low-level walls to provide defensible space and accord with the area design code. The 4-storey flat blocks form bookends to the 3-storey houses which front onto the fast track route. These designs propose soldier coursing in contrasting brick, plinth banding, projecting brick coin details surrounding the windows and the entrances and the building corners, and along with a sawtooth gable end roof form, which responds to the surrounding proposals in Alkton Village. The scheme exceeds the M42 provision required by the outline plan permission, and both flat blocks include lifts. 61 parking spaces, 13 of which are for visitors and 2 disabled spaces, are sensitively located and screened by landscaping or have pergolas covering them to integrate with the street scene. Secure cycle parking is also proposed, and each dwelling will have an individual air source heat pump and adopt a fabric first approach to reduce carbon emissions and reduce their energy consumption. Low energy light fittings and low water consumption fittings are proposed, and electrical vehicle car charging is provided for each parking space. Importantly, the scheme accords with the approved Alkton Area Master Plan and design codes. It will bring forward new homes at an identified parcel of land, helping form the wider completion of Alkton Village. Bellway and its team is very proud of this high quality proposal and is really pleased that the scheme is supported by your planning officers. We thank you, Chairman and committee members, for your time this afternoon, and we respectfully ask that the committee approves this application in accordance with the officer's recommendation. Bellway and its team are here to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, committee members, our chance to ask any questions. Does anybody have questions they'd like to raise? Councillor Mode.
Thank you. Just a quickie, really. One of the things that Dartford will be responsible for is emptying the bins. And this may sound like a bit of a puerile sort of question, but where will they be putting them? I didn't see anything. Bins aren't very attractive when you put illustrations together, but I'm just interested because these things are quite large and there's usually 3 of them. So I assume because of the nature of the access from the back and the fact you've got large turning areas, you're assuming that the collection vehicles will travel around the back of these buildings and collect the bins from there. So is that where the bins are going to be stored, or is there special storage areas?
I don't know whether I should defer to Alec Philpott, who's our transport consultant, who also helped design the tracking of the laneway to ensure that refuse collection can be achieved.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Greg. I can pick that up. Good afternoon, everybody. Is it possible to share my screen? Would that be helpful? We do have a refuse strategy plan that I can share with you.
Let's do that. We've got you on quite a big screen, so
okay. So let me know when that pops up.
it has.
Okay, so starting at the east of the scheme, there we have storage points on the northern flank there for the fog units, where the refuse vehicle will travel along Portbridge Gardens to collect those. You can see these green stores there. Within the laneway of the site, there's the rear of the gardens to the houses. There are these stores here, and there's sufficient space for the refuse vehicle to turn within the landscaped area there. To the west, all collection is from street, and we have the collection points at the rear of the gardens there. So, and all of the drag routes out. So hopefully that clears that up for you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Perfect.
Thank you very much. Penny.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. Just clarification about the EV unit. If the cars are going to be parked away under the pergolas, which that's what I do, will they then be linked to the electricity in the house for each dwelling, or will they be metered, or will they have to? How are they going to pay for it? Because I'm sure it's not going to be free.
So Alec, I don't know whether you want to answer this or I can answer this. The proposal is that the EV charging unit would be attached to the pergola,
Right.
so that they're close to the car.
Mm.
And where parking spaces are underneath the coach houses, there will be the inside wall of the parking space in the coach house. Alec, is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and you're correct that charging won't be free. So each of the units will have to be cabled up to the respective charging points. So each person pays for their own.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other, Valerie?
Yes, can I ask about the parking? I mean, you talked about there being two spaces for disabled person, but the report says that the accessible space is actually 1.2 metres wide. So they're sort of labelled as that, but they don't necessarily meet the criteria. And similarly, there isn't space for adaptive cycles. So it doesn't feel as if this is terribly inclusive in terms of the design. And the report says that there are, I think it's 5 spaces too few in relation to the numbers of units, and is recommending that these particular units are advertised as being car free. But again, I can't quite work out how that's going to be managed, because KCC is saying they absolutely don't wish there to be any ad hoc or on-street parking, and indeed, I'm sure neither would we as planning committee members. So I don't know if you can respond to those issues, please.
Yeah, I can, and I might ask Alec as well to assist with some of those parking matters. Some of the one-bed flats are proposed without parking spaces, so they'll be car-free flats, whereas the rest of all the other units will have a dedicated parking space. And in terms of disabled parking, I understand that we have 2 disabled parking spaces with adequate space around them to make sure that they are accessible disabled spaces.
That's absolutely correct. Shall I share my screen again quickly? I can show you the parking allocation plan. If you just bear with me. So there were 3 points there I picked up on. The first was the disabled parking that we're currently discussing, and it's 2 of the 12 visitor spaces identified as suitable for accessible spaces. They benefit from strips on both sides. So one towards the centre of the development there. This is the access into the laneway there, and then the additional space is towards the west of the scheme. allocated here with the 2 strips either side. There are, outside of the red line, you'll note, as part of another scheme, additional spaces proposed, say outside our red line, so we would expect those to come forward as well, although don't rely on them. In relation to allocation of parking, you're absolutely right that there are actually 7 flatted dwellings that will not be allocated any parking spaces. This results in a parking ratio of 0.6 spaces per dwellings for the flats. All other houses and FOGs benefit from a provision of 1 space each, and the 0.6 for the flats is quite well aligned with the previous consent, where we had 138 dwellings and 102 allocated spaces, which I think equates to about 0.7, and sits quite well with the STS parking standards, which would actually allow sort of 0 spaces. We're very aware, and officers have reminded us, that the 7 flats that wouldn't benefit from a parking space need to be marketed as such from day one. People need to be aware they won't benefit from parking, and we're also aware that combined with that, we need to have quite a strong parking management regime, which is subject to a condition, and we're considering having a maximum 24-hour stay in any of the visitor spaces, so that any of the residents who don't have an allocated bay don't get used to being able to park and all of a sudden adopt a space. You also touched on cargo cycle parking. Understandably, every single one of the housing units will benefit from the ability to be able to accommodate cargo cycles in their stores in the rear gardens. It wasn't possible to adapt the cycle stores for the flats to be able to squeeze in cargo cycle parking there, although there are spaces outside of each of the blocks, and on the western one it's just here, where you could chain an adaptive cycle. We do exceed the 5% provision that I know is desired by virtue of the housing provision. So hopefully that answers all of the 3 questions.
Yes, I think so. Can I ask about the pedestrian routes? I could see 1 or 2, I think, on the plan that you showed, but it's kind of hard to work out what the travel distances are. And it looked to me as if there were, I don't know, 50, certainly 100 metres from one to the other. You know what I mean? If you want to sort of loop around the block, how far do you have to walk to be able to kind of move fairly freely through the development?
Right, down onto to fast track. Do you mean down sort of this area?
Move around the development itself. There's the cliffs back, aren't there? But there are a couple of pedestrian routes, but they just look to me as if they're quite far apart.
So there's a pedestrian route at the east of the western part of the site, and a central pedestrian route through the centre of the site as well, and the laneway. I think because of the form of them being terraced housing, there isn't the route north-south through the scheme in other areas because they are terraced housing. In terms of lengths, I don't know what those lengths of terraced housing is. I don't know if there's if you know, Alec, roughly the lengths of those houses.
I'm afraid I don't, Greg. No.
We've got a scale. Someone's got a scale.
I mean, for younger persons, it wouldn't be a problem again, but it might be.
But yeah, obviously each of these dwellings will benefit from direct access to the south from their front doors. So anyone having to walk around the back, it literally, well, I think most people benefit from direct access. I don't know whether Chris can comment on that.
Meters.
Yeah, I thought it was. I was trying to calculate it, so it is quite a long walk.
I think the view is everybody will the fast track and then east or west, so it's coming south.
Necessarily walk the length of the development, is it?
Yeah, or you'd walk to the school. I don't think it'd really be a reason. So
we have still 2 rooms that fail the daylight adequacy test. Is there nothing more that we could do there? I was thinking, I don't know whether it's actually located, but I mean, something like, like tunnels, for example.
So I understand that the two rooms which narrowly miss the daylight sunlight requirement are bedrooms, and the reason is for balconies overhanging them above, which is caused the lighting. I think Chris and his team did look at potentially amending the arrangement, but to have a stacking, is that right? It wasn't possible to amend those rooms, but they do only fall short very slightly, and officers consider on balance that the daylight sunlight of those dwellings is acceptable.
David, yes.
No, it's interesting. One of the things I've written down here is the fact that you effectively designed out any surplus cars, because if anybody else brings any cars onto the site, there is literally nowhere except in the bays. I always say that because you only have to go around Ebbsfleet to find people parking where they shouldn't be parking, because there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity here, which is a good thing. But my concern is that we sell a flat that says you will not have any parking, and that flat is then rented out to somebody and they don't tell them that there is no parking, and then we have issues from there. But that's just an aside, which I'm sure you're aware of. It's not something we can really dictate through planning, but it is a nightmare that goes on in many of the developments around this part of the country, where the majority of people buy and then rent and don't tell everybody what they actually bought in the first place. I was very commendable the environmental aspects of it, but I'm fascinated. But you've got a wonderful line of houses ranging from east to west. Did you not think of putting PV panels on any of those, because it would seem that they would get sunlight almost all day? Was that not something that was considered to be appropriate? Because I know you've got so many other bits and pieces in there. It just seems to be a bit of a lost or missed opportunity.
So the detailed energy strategy will be coming forward at detailed design stage.
Okay.
And it will be needing to meet that requirement, which has been set out in that supplementary condition of at least a 62% reduction in carbon. The way the roofs are along the fast track routes, they've got a sawtooth element to it, and they're not actually south facing. So to put PV panels on them, be either east facing or west facing, which means they're not as efficient as if they're on a south facing roof. But if there is a requirement for PV panels, there is a south facing roof on coach houses, which could better accommodate them. But that will be agreed at a detailed energy strategy stage to meet the requirements set out in that proposed condition.
And the only other thing I would suggest is that your planting regime for biodiversity, maybe you should also factor in a question of drought-resistant planting as well, because you only have to look out the window at the sunshine we've got now, and the fact that plants do have an unfortunate habit of not being watered as much as they should be. Please, can you make sure that any planting you go in there fits with the indigenous species we have here? But if you can put in drought resistant as well, that would be probably very helpful. But I'm sure you've got that all under control anyway.
I could ask Adam if he's got any thoughts on that.
I think that's a wonderful idea. Yeah, that's a very, very valid point, and certainly something we can accommodate within the planting design. We'd certainly be keen to be looking at a detailed planting proposal, bearing in mind the conditions of this site specifically. We are looking to maximise variety within the planting as well, noting the minimum 25% native, and also consideration of how we can maximise benefits for biodiversity on this site.
Thank you.
Just taking David's point, I'm not sure I quite understood how the car parking enforcement is going to take place. I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult, I think, to supervise this and discourage people precisely because they're going to park, they can seek to park.
Well, in terms of the car-free flats, Bellway has a requirement to its customers to inform them that they're selling a flat which is car-free. And there will be a parking management plan that is required by condition, setting out how parking enforcement will be brought forward at the site. Alex, did you want to say anything about the parking management plan?
No, only that this isn't an unusual situation, and Bellway have been used to having companies and management companies deal with this across a number of sites. So I'm quite confident that we'll be able to manage it, and it's in Bellway's interest to make sure it is managed.
If I can just pursue that for a moment. You can control through the parking management plan parking on site. So the focus will be on stopping people in the car-free flats from parking in the visitor spaces, if you can manage that. Once you get off-site, it's not an area where you've got a traffic regulation order and residents parking, which is where car-free works because they don't get a residence parking permit, so there's nowhere to park. Have you considered the impact if people do try and park off-site when you've got the education campus next door and there may be people trying to access that? How is that controlled?
So Kent have actually raised this issue of particularly Portbridge Gardens, and have requested that when that becomes adopted, it's subject to appropriate traffic orders to prohibit parking. So that's something that I would definitely support. In relation to the school, sorry, Chair, are you saying how do we deal with people from the school parking on the local roads, or?
You can only control parking on your site. What happens when people try and park off the site? And I just happened to mention that because you've got a school, you might have lots of other people trying to park as well.
I understood. Yeah, I mean, that really will ultimately be a matter for the Highway Authority to control using the appropriate traffic orders when that road is adopted.
Which means double yellow lines.
Correct.
But none of the roads within this development, I think I read, are intended to be adopted, are they?
Not the one within our site itself, the laneway, the landscape laneway. That'll be privately maintained, and we'll have control over that, so we can appropriately enforce.
So it'd be with private enforcement companies.
That's correct. Yeah.
Any more from anybody else? Lee?
Could I just ask, any affordable housing, social housing in this scheme?
No, this scheme is not proposing any affordable.
Stop proposing. Thank you. Or not, thank you.
Well, as I understand it, but perhaps we can discuss this when we finish asking questions there. Our hands are slightly tied, but any more questions for Mr. Evans?
Right. One more, please, which is around noise. We've got these south-facing frontages, which also face fast track, and now more recently the requirement to comply with cooling under Part O. I mean, do we have any idea at all? I realise that's the detailed stage as opposed to, if you like, the design stage, but I mean, can we achieve what's required? Have you done some initial studies? Will the scheme work, function?
Yes is the answer. A noise report accompanied the application, and that set out proposals to mitigate internal noise for the dwellings. And I understand that there's a requirement for the development to be was in accordance with the proposed mitigation in that noise report to provide suitable amenity to residents and houses front. Have I missed anything on that?
No, that was, yeah, so that's got everything within the noise report. Talks about mitigation with the kind of for the residents along the fast track properties.
Thank you. Any other? Right. Well, thank you very much indeed for that presentation, and suggest you're comfortable going back to where you were before. Right, now our chance to debate and discuss this. On affordable housing, as I understand it, the affordable housing was set at the outline planning application stage, and that reserve matters we're tied by what was decided before. But is it right? There's no affordable housing on this, whereas on the 138 unit scheme, number may be wrong.
Yes.
Was there affordable housing on that?
That is correct. So during the course of the application, this did come up, and the wording in the section 106 for the site, when it came forward before, identifies sites that if it provides less than 100 dwellings, these sites wouldn't be required to provide the affordable housing contributions. I've got that correct, haven't I? So if it's site, so for example, the flatted site was over 100 units, therefore it had to provide a degree of affordable housing. This site is less than 100 dwellings, so therefore, in accordance with the 106, there was no obligation to provide affordable housing on the site.
But as I understand it, you still got to get up to the level of 25%, which was the original figure, lower, I think, than the new figure, but the original figure at the time the outline permission was granted. And I also read in the report, officers haven't just rolled over on this, they took legal advice on the planning obligation.
That's correct, yeah.
Sorry, anybody else? But it seems to me it's got, I mean, in some way, sometimes you have schemes where you're too worried there are too many flats, not enough family houses. And this has got lots of family houses. Unfortunately, none of them are affordable, but
what is affordable?
and it seems to me that it's quite a difficult site with the change in levels, and the scheme does provide a solution, and hopefully this one will work unlike the last one.
It's the last one, was that? But there's another story.
It came before the committee, I think, and it's in the relevant planning history. There was 2.3 in the report, 138 flats, and I can remember we had a discussion about the coach houses.
Oh, sorry, you mean this
on this site?
Oh, sorry, you meant on the site. Sorry.
No, on this site.
Because of course the thing was, yes, if it had been flats, it would have hit that threshold, and then they would have had to produce. Yes. Yeah. Funny that. Yes.
But there is just to confirm what the chair said, there is still a requirement for 25% affordable housing across the whole of the property. So don't be concerned that there isn't something this possible.
No. No. I have to say that, I mean, it conforms with the vernacular that we find fronting onto most of the fast track further to the east. I'm always concerned, even though I'm Dartford and we have the plan, I'm always worried about the size of gardens. By the way, I still think it's not perfect, but I don't think you'll find perfection. I'm interested with the what we used to call, well, I know your colleague still calls them fogs, but you don't call them fogs in here. They've got more remarkable name, I guess. But I'm fascinated by one or two bedroom, those really small houses. It's quite interesting. I've not seen something like that before, so I'll be interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think compared to flats and everything, this is really quite exciting. Providing family homes, it's really good. I am concerned about the parking. Even the 4-bed homes only having one parking space, and I do think it's got to be really, really carefully marketed as, you know, a place where you won't need a car. And, you know, and to be really, really clear to people buying, because otherwise it will be. I mean, I support the reduced car ownership and things, but practically I think that's one of the things that would be concerning. But like you, I like the coach houses.
Yeah,
that's a very.
I mean, is there still a car club in Ipswich? I don't really know. Yes. Yeah. So there should be, if there's a natural link into the car club, and people don't necessarily need to own a car, and they can rent a car that they may need for a particular occasion. Maybe that's something to see that, but that's a marketing thing rather than a planning thing.
Yeah, there is. So there's a parking management plan under the outline consent, which is under review at the moment. There's an existing one, but it needs to be updated every so often.
Sure.
And as part of that review, a more strategic approach to car clubs is being looked at. So there are car clubs that have been either delivered or are yet to be delivered on site, depending on the stage of delivery of some of the parcels. And we're looking at that in a more sort of holistic view so that they're located appropriately and then the right number per village.
Absolutely. Now, I think they are an answer to this perennial problem that we have. But again, it's the mentality of society that you own a car. I think we just need to be able to encourage people the fact that cars are actually very expensive and tend to sit still for a very long time. And you need to get the price, that's beyond this.
But the closest car club for this site is in Portbridge Gardens, so the custom build, which is immediately north of this site. There is one. So it will be under 5-minute walk from this site.
There you go. Marketing department.
That's good. And if everybody, when they move in, they give them details is that part of the parking management plan that they should be?
Can be there. So there's a condition requiring detail, so we can make sure that that's captured within that.
But yeah, just one last thing, and I'm sorry, Matt.
No, please.
One thing that we've always said, or I've always said, is of course that it's not the houses that turn the water on, that turn the lights on, and turn them off. It's the people that live inside them. So it's all well and good having these wonderful things in your houses, unless you educate the owners of those houses how to use them properly. There's no point. You've got to educate the people. So if you can do something when they move in their moving impacts that actually explain all these things to them, including car clubs, I think that would be exceptionally useful.
Thank you. How do we enforce if in fact there are issues do arise? Because clearly around the table there is concern about parking in particular. They're not adopted roads. So we've got a parking management strategy and a plan, but that can only be enforced, so to speak, by the residents themselves because it's effectively a private development on a private estate. And what happens? A resident complains, and then how do we How do we enforce the conditions? I would say similarly with the landscaping, actually, because this is a scheme that relies really heavily on landscaping, partly because of the nature of it. It's very linear, very constrained. We talk a lot about the rhythm, but actually it's repetitive as is rhythm. So, it's kind of dependent on having really high quality landscaping to make it attractive, more humane, as it were. And it's a similar thing. It says that the landscaping must be maintained in perpetuity. But what happens when a tree? How do we enforce it? How do we ensure that we're going to retain this sort of quality in terms of the external environment?
Would one of the officers like to answer that? I think I know what the standard answer is.
Well, I think, in terms of trees, there is a condition on the outline consent about the replacement of trees if they become dead, dying, dangerous. So there is a sort of a planning trigger for that should they be identified. As a department, we are carrying out landscaping audits across the site to see that landscaping is being delivered and maintained in accordance with the approved plans. So there's sort of monitoring in place to fulfil that. In terms of the parking challenges, yes, it is a challenge. I think the answer is going to be in the parking management strategy, which is conditioned, and the proposals put forward by the applicant in terms of how they intend to monitor that and ensure that there is a trigger that we will be able to pick up if there is areas that aren't working, that we can then review that strategy and try and mitigate any issues that arise that might be reported by residents. But it is a challenge.
I would only add that we've worked hard to try and design out as many informal parking spaces as possible so that if you park, you're going to be blocking someone else from parking. Yeah. There's a couple of spaces that I think you could probably sneak a car in, but not many, very, very few. So then, as you've already highlighted, it becomes a problem for the wider area. There is a parking management plan in place, as you say, for the whole village, and the expectation that is managed across the whole village. But that just displaces the problem potentially further afield.
just as a sort of a response to Mal as well, because you're going to have two sets of planting. As far as I can see, you're going to have the communal planting, which will be looked after by a third party, I guess, a management services company. But then you're going to have the planting that's actually in and around people's homes, which they are going to be responsible for. And again, sorry to be boring, that's where you need to start educating people as to what they plant on their pitch. Otherwise, they're going to either cover the back gardens with grass, then water it until it's drowned, or put horrible sort of astroturf on it. But there are other opportunities, and again, that biodiversity created by what they plant in their gardens is as important as the biodiversity we create by putting the community stuff in. So it's education, and unfortunately, house builders, forgive me, I was one once. They tend to sell it and get away. You need to educate people who move into our houses. And they are our customers, even though we have gone away.
And we've got condition 18 on part, which does require that the detail should confirm how future purchasers will be made aware of parking management regimes. And yes, we do have the approved parking controls and enforcement shall be operational from first residential occupation, maintained thereafter in perpetuity. So there will be an ability to enforce that condition. And I think you wouldn't want to go crashing in with a breach of condition notice, but it gives you a tool to start a proper conversation, seems to me.
And this is, in terms of location, this is a very sustainable site, right in the centre of Algden, right next door to the education campus, right next door to where the hub, to the forthcoming health facilities and the community hub. So if you're going to try and lower parking anywhere, then this is a good place to be doing it.
And if fast track is properly in place and fully operational when people move in, it makes such a difference because people move in knowing there's a good public transport service. Is there anything else from anybody before we move to make a decision? No? Well, I'll put the officer recommendation, which is to approve subject to conditions, but it's the recommendation is the one on the agenda, and it's that authority be done, and it's in the supplementary information. Authority be delegated to the Director of Planning and Place to approve the application and grant planning permission subject to the imposition of the planning conditions as set out in the report, with delegated authority to the Director of Planning and Place to make minor changes to the wording. Do we agree that?
Joyce, and we will amend the last condition on the supplementary.
Yeah. Do we agree that? That's unanimous. Well, thank you very much to everybody for all their work in assessing the application and presenting it. So thank you very much indeed. So next on our agenda is delegated items report. Is there anything you'd like to say on this, Mark?
No, I don't think so. The usual update, this covers 11 decisions that were made during the month of July. Interestingly, August has been a bit of a bumper month for decisions, so I think the report for next time probably will be a bit longer. But yeah, obviously happy to take any questions as usual, or we can follow up if not.
Any questions on that? No. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you to everybody. I think that brings our meeting to a close. So thank you.
There you go.
Do you end the recording, please?